Welcome to Childhelp's Dare to Care podcast, where every story of struggle transforms into a beacon of hope. Together, we'll uncover the courage to rise above our challenges and rediscover joy and resilience. Let's dare to care.
Due to the sensitive nature of the content, viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Pena, and this is the Childhelp Dare to Care Survivor Series podcast. We are broadcasting today from the Center for Positive Media. I'm here in studio with Michael Maduro, the Chief of Staff for Childhelp and my co-host on this series. And we are so happy to welcome in my very good friend, Brandon Lee, the founder of Art of Our Soul, author and entrepreneur. And for those who are watching and listening, Brandon and I also used to co-anchor the news together. So we're very dear and close friends. Brandon, you have written and talked a lot about the trauma that you experienced as a child. And you have done that in large part to help your own healing so that you can help others.
Yeah, I wrote the book and I've really been able to speak a lot about that because I've done the healing work. I don't think I would ever have been able to write a book about, my childhood, the childhood trauma that I experienced. And of course, write the adult destructive behaviors that are born out of unhealed childhood trauma had I not done the healing process. And really, to be quite honest with you, have done the real, true, deep-seated healing work over the last 3.5 years. And it's when I look back at my timeline of just my life, it's really been the most transformative time of my life, right? Total career change and finding my true purpose and value in this world. And that only happened when I really dove deep and really did the child healing work that was necessary.
And Brandon's book is called Mascara Boy. Talk to the audience, Brandon, if you will, about some of the trauma that you experienced.
Yeah, sure. I find it really important whenever I share my story that people understand that I was born into privilege. And I think when you are born into a life of privilege, you should own that. Mm-hmm. I was born in Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, California. It really doesn't get much more gorgeous than beautiful. That. It's a beautiful part of the world. However, when you're born into it, you take it for granted because you don't know what the other parts of the world look like. So you're so associated within your own bubble. So I grew up there, right? I grew up in an affluent family. Had a beautiful roof over my head, never had to worry about food on the table. And I went to some of the best Catholic schools around and had a chance to play really competitive soccer. And for a brief time, for a couple of months, even went over to Europe to play soccer as a teenager. So right from the outside looking in, little Brandon had the perfect life. And I was really good at putting a smile over my face. But I think the message that I want people to know is that no matter the amount of privilege that you were born into in this world, that privilege does not protect you from abuse and child abuse. And, for me, my child abuse was a lot of child molestation. And it was by 3 people in my life, 3 men who had access to me. It was my youth soccer coach, my piano teacher, and one of my neighbors. And they had all unfettered access to me. They were all trusted family friends. Aside from the child molestation, there was also a lot of physical abuse and neglect within my own home. I can speak openly about that. I've had conversations with my parents. I have stood up to them saying, I don't appreciate the way I was raised 100%. And these things really hurt me and harmed me. But I do now really want to make people understand that while I don't have a close relationship with my family, and I definitely don't have a very close bond with either of my parents, I still love them. And I give them so much grace because I'm so trauma informed enough now to understand that my parents experienced, not suffered, I don't like that word suffer, but they experienced immense trauma as children themselves. Our parents grew up in a generation where vulnerability was seen as a weakness and not a strength. So our parents' generation, parents really never had an opportunity to heal from themselves from the childhood trauma that they experienced, which again was generational trauma passed down from their parents. And so the more trauma informed that I became in my spiritual growth and my spiritual healing ended up giving me so much grace. And by that grace, I harbor no ill will nor resentment, which has really freed me from my own self-destruction that led me down that path. And so I think it's okay to not to verbalize and experience not having a close bond with my parents, but still loving them from afar. I mean, I just texted with my mom the other day, so we still will communicate, but it's not ever going to be a very closeness bond in this lifetime.
Talk a little bit about, I mean, you sit here today so strong in where you are, and that makes me so proud because I've been alongside you in this journey.
You've seen the ups and downs for sure.
But talk to the audience about, you went to the depths and you hit rock bottom. You were living a double life. You were deep in addiction. It took a lot for you to get where you are today.
Yeah. When we are born into this world, right, our brains are wired like this, right? Our brains are wired for connection. When we experience trauma, it throws the wiring off in our brain and we begin to misfire. And while the molestation, the physical abuse or neglect, yes, those are traumatic life experiences and they can absolutely mess up the wiring in the brain. The actual childhood attachment trauma I'm speaking of is between the ages of 0 and 3 or 0 and 5, right? Something that my frontal lobe can go back and remember. But was I held every day? Did I feel that connection to my mother in a really organic and loving way? And the fact of the matter is that both my parents were very hardworking because in their minds, in that generation, they worked their butts off
to provide
this beautiful home in Laguna Beach, to provide these things for our children. So that was their priority. And what ended up happening as the youngest child, right, at 3-4 weeks old, I was dropped off at a daycare center with 50 other kids. So I didn't have that love and that connection and that holding every day, and that threw the wiring off in my brain. And so at the age of 15, I became a cocaine addict. And I also became a sex worker and started selling my body to men in their 40s and 50s in Laguna Beach at the age of 15. Again, not needing money, not needing a roof over my head, not needing food on the table, not needing that money to survive. It's just the way the destructive behaviors came out. Subsequently, at the age of 21, I survived 9/11 living in New York City and was on my way to work that morning at 30 Rockefeller Plaza while going to NYU, also working at the Today Show, and was underground that morning on the subway when the towers were hit. And one was, one of the lucky people to survive that morning. But I was 21. I was a pro at going into survival mode. So all I did was rationalize and suppress that energy and trauma energy. I didn't do any therapy work at age 21. And so all that still lived within me, but became an overachiever. And that's why I was able to live this double life for so long, because as a child, I wanted to earn my parents' love. Mm-hmm. I wanted to earn their praise and their affection. And so I would only do that by accomplishing things. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to live that double life of being a drug addict and also being very successful in my career, to be quite honest with you, at a very young age. I was a news anchor and a journalist in Los Angeles, California at KTLA-5. And, within 10 minutes of the news getting done, I'd be in the studio parking lot getting high on GHB and meth. And eventually, like many addicts, right, we'll experience overdose. And my overdose, I was found nearly dead. On the streets of LA one morning, ended up in a coma on life support at Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital. And the chief neurosurgeon was like, hey, listen, we've got to do brain surgery on you tonight. You're not going to survive this. And I just looked at him and said, the F you are. And in a clear delusional state, I just ripped all the cords off my body and walked out, signed myself out AMA against medical advice, walked out just wearing a hospital robe, walked about 1.5 miles down Hollywood Boulevard, again, being a known journalist in Los Angeles at that time, got in my truck, and what did I do? I got high again. I literally blacked out. Somebody found me that morning. I ended up in the same ER, same team of doctors who had saved my life now twice in 2 weeks, and was really shown a lot of grace by a frontline worker. I won't get into the details because that story can go on for hours, but I ended up, going to my first AA meeting as soon as I was released from the hospital, and maintained 11 years of continuous sobriety up until 2020. And for that time, all I did was go to meetings. I never actually healed myself from my trauma. And so in 2020, I was doing the news, right? We had the pandemic, and the way the world really reacted to the pandemic, we ripped away connection from everybody. And by ripping away that connection, we did equal or even more damage than the virus itself. And so we saw a lot of spikes of suicide. We also saw overdoses, right? We saw depression at all levels, from child all the way until our seniors. I was no different, right? I experienced the effects of that. And then, covering the BLM protest all that summer and the murder of George Floyd, and then turned into an election here in Arizona, which was a total chaotic mess. I was on the receiving end of a lot of threats to my life and extortion attempts. And I went into fight or flight. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And never healing from my childhood trauma, only abstaining from drugs and alcohol and going to AA meetings, never healed. So when that trauma hit for the first time in 11 years, I relapsed and experienced that darkness and a darkness I had never experienced in my life. My relapse lasted 7 hours that night on meth before I was like, what am I doing? The shame.
Yeah.
The shame is absolutely indescribable unless you have ever felt it or accepted it or walked through that. And I had so much shame, I couldn't even tell my trauma therapist that I relapsed because I thought I let my trauma therapist down. Now that goes back to childhood stuff, right? Being a people pleaser, right? Wanting to earn that praise that I couldn't even tell my own trauma therapist that I just relapsed because she would look different at me, right? That's where I was at. And that led to suicidal ideation in January of 2021. They were like, there was no more light at the end of this tunnel. My therapist knew something was off. I couldn't fool her anymore. And so she just asked me, like, are you thinking about taking your life? And I broke down and I said, yes, I am. And she goes, okay, like you got to start working with Toby. Toby is a spiritual healer, works in my therapist's office. He's also a trained shaman. And I started doing deep breath work beginning that night, 2-hour sessions every single week. And in that deep breath work, similar to EMDR, but different, I can get past my frontal lobe to the amygdala where we store traumatic and that fight or flight response and store those traumatic memories, and started to reprocess and do that childhood reprocessing of traumatic events. Things that I didn't even remember in talk therapy were coming up in these sessions. And the more connected I became to my inner child, I started seeing visions of myself creating artwork. And so was really encouraged to explore and experiment with art. I did, and it was July of 2021 where I woke up and 3 words were actually written on my nightstand: studio, gallery, and school, on a paper towel, and really kind of worked through what those words meant. Had an epiphany of the summer of 2021 that I saw my future in a journey with my healer. And that journey and the voice that I heard was I needed to leave news, a career of which I had of 22 years, to open up an art healing studio for trauma survivors like myself, to simply give them the gift of art in the way art has helped me heal from my trauma. September 27th is a day I'll never forget. I was my last day on air of the news, and I had a true just epiphany, but also mental breakdown. And I left. And a month later, I opened up Art of Our Soul. I've been open for more than 2.5 years, and it's been life-changing for me. To be able to, as a peer, to help people and see them in real time healing through joy is really my life's purpose. And I think it's really important that people also understand when you do the healing work, it is a heavy lift and it can be dark, reprocessing that childhood trauma. It is. Just, it is. One of the things I see so often is people give up after a month or two of beginning that healing work because it's just so heavy. And they go into that next therapy session and they're just like, I can't do this. Like, I can't cry anymore. Like, I can't go dark again. And so when I was creating artwork, I'd pound the music, like upbeat music, and just get lost in it. And so the modality that I've created was, okay, I know that some of the work in reprocessing childhood trauma is dark and it's heavy. I'm going to create something that is joyful, create new neural pathways that release dopamine. So I don't care if you're fresh off detox. I don't know where you're at in your stage, but come into my studio for 15 minutes. I'll get you to laugh. You'll dance again, because we have to, as providers, give people an opportunity to heal through joy and combine that with some of the other work too. And that keeps people engaged.
Healing through joy. I love that. What a blessing of a saying and an expression. I've always laughed, very much like you, growing up, overachiever, people pleaser. I always identified my self-worth by whatever I could achieve and accomplish. Yes. And if I failed, I took it hard. I mean, really hard. Art was the one thing I never felt comfortable with because it was so abstract. There was no criteria that I could say that was good or that was bad outside of my own self-perception. And I see now, I mean, a number of the programs and services that we offer through Childhelp allow children to use art to be able to tell their story and to express their thoughts and their feelings and their emotions with no grade, no judgment, no scale, just express. And to see children come on in and they use such dark colors, blacks and deep blues and purples, and then over the transformation of their healing, they're starting to use vibrant colors and the yellows and the reds and the oranges as a means of expression. And you can see literally the physical transformation of them through the joy on their face as they're getting able to express something. What a blessing you've been able to bring to yourself, to your community. I know about some of the other projects that you've got going on. Thank you for that gift to yourself and to this community. It is amazing to hear that. And I can see the joy on you right now. And it's awesome. The joy.
I feel blessed. Like, gosh, like I know that they do and people say that, but I'm like, God, I feel blessed. I feel blessed. And I think the thing I want people to understand is this, and I'm sure you hear this too, maybe in your own circle of friends, people go like, I don't know what my purpose is.
Mm-hmm. All the time.
Like, I don't
all
know
the time.
what this is. First off, your job does not have to be your purpose. It doesn't have to be, okay? But my God, do something outside of your job if it's not fulfilling, right? But I hear that all the time. And what I tell people is this. Every one of us will experience trauma in this lifetime. Every single one of us will experience trauma in this lifetime. Trauma is an opportunity, if we allow it to be an opportunity to teach us, heal from it, grow from it, so that then we can help people through theirs.
Yes.
That is life's purpose.
Yes.
Is to help another human being and make their life a little bit easier through our lived experiences. I was taught recently that the world's most profound and impactful healers have oftentimes experienced some of the harshest and worst traumas around. So if there is somebody who inspires you, someone who you gravitate toward, and you may never meet them in person, but perhaps you hear them on a TED Talk or a podcast, do research about them. And if you have the ability to meet them in person, ask them, what was your childhood like? I guarantee you, you will find a person who has experienced immense trauma. What they have done is they have actively faced it, vocalized it, and healed from it. You know, you will meet people in life where you're like, God, nothing bad ever happens to that person. They're just kind of like this. I'm like, yeah, but nothing amazing happens to that person either. Right? Like nothing amazing happens. Science teaches us there is an equal and opposite reaction to everything.
Right.
So if you believe in the devil, then you must believe in God.
Right.
If you believe in the dark, then you have to believe in the light. So what I tell people is that if you are in the dark, as I was in January of 2021, there was truly no light at the end of this tunnel anymore. On the other side of it, I can tell you and promise you, there is an equal amount of light and brightness that will shine upon you if you continue to walk through that tunnel.
Yes.
For the people who are listening to you and inspired by what you're saying and your journey and your success today, what do you say to them when they're in that dark place or don't know how to get to the healing?
Yeah, first off, I would say it's okay to acknowledge to someone that you're in a dark space. And just by vocalizing that, I can't tell you like what a weight was lifted when I was able to just say yes, that I was having suicidal ideation. Like just instant tears just came out. Like that energy is just trying to come out. All that is stored energy within our bodies. My first several sessions in the deep breath work, I didn't say a word. I just wailed, cried, right? That was just so much trauma energy just stored in my body. I mean, for 2 hours, like drenched in sweat, drenched in tears, just crying. It is a powerful thing to allow yourself to feel. And by the way, it's okay to feel dark. It's okay. Like nothing's wrong with you. Like I'm in a really dark place, but say it to someone. say it to someone, and that's the beginning of that healing journey, right? It doesn't last forever.
B, thank you so much for being here.
For sure.
And
it's a
where
great
can people
conversation.
follow along on your journey? Because Art of Our Soul, there's some big things happening. I don't know what we're allowed to say right yet, but there's some big things happening.
There is some big things happening. I can say this because I've been promised that this is going to be posted after the news is made public. So, listen, I'm really excited. We work with a lot of trauma. We only work with trauma survivors. So we work with a lot of youth and adolescents. We've worked all the way with those in long-term care, so Alzheimer's, round-the-clock care. So we run the gamut. Substance use disorder, you name it, we have worked with that population. And now we're actually building our art and music therapy studios on our state prison yards, like the highest risk prison yards. Some people are like, oh my God, they don't deserve it. Like, why would you ever allow inmates to have fun, dance in your studio and create artwork? Like, they should be punished. Well, the whole idea of lock them up and throw away the key does not heal trauma. And so I always tell people, well, yes, I'm never going to be the one to excuse someone for the destructive behavior that they have caused. Like, I'm not excusing that, but I want people to understand that there's a reason that led them to prison. There's a reason why they went down that destructive path, and it's oftentimes rooted in childhood trauma. And if we know that, and we know what the root cause of something is, then why don't we go out there and pull the weed instead of mowing it? Because that weed will continue to grow back. Right? It's like if you have a car that's driving on the road and you're a damn good driver, right? And you're like keeping it in the fast lane, but all of a sudden that car is like trying to take you off the road, whether it be the alignment or bad wiring. Well, if you continue to ignore it, that car is going to eventually crash and burn. What do you do with that car? You take it to the auto body shop, right? And you take it to a mechanic. Mechanic goes under the hood and go, dude, your wiring's all messed up. I got to fix the wiring, right? Fix the wiring, you're back on the road, and all of a sudden you're able to drive again. Well, the same thing is true in that analogy. If I have an accident and they know the wiring's bad, but I just take it to an auto body shop and I let it sit there for 10 years. And then 10 years later, I need a car. So I go back and pick up that car from the auto body shop and I try to take it on the road. None of the wiring's ever been fixed. How on earth am I expecting that same car to drive perfectly on the highway? Right. It's going to crash and burn the moment I take it back on the road. We have to look at the inmate population in the exact same way. We have to do the healing work while they're incarcerated so that when they do have every right after they serve their sentence to reintegrate in society, they're reintegrating with a better wired brain, right? So like getting people to understand
simple sense when you explain it that way, right?
like now you put it that way.
Right. So anyway, I'm really excited. I love that population. There are just a lot of wounded little boys and little girls trapped in adults' bodies. And if we can go back and let that inner child know that they are loved and cared for and that they don't have to run in fight or flight and live in that sympathetic nervous system of just chaos, we can kind of bring their cortisol levels down. We can really create and give life to a lot of people and a lot of healing work.
Well, look what that you wrote on a napkin.
It's crazy.
3 things. You sketched it out, and look at what that has become.
Almost 3 years ago. It's crazy.
Amazing.
I know, it's wild.
Sketched it out and had the bravery to follow through.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
B, thank you so much. I know your words today will inspire so many people, so we appreciate you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I love the work, and I love this podcast, what you guys are doing. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Childhelp, making it happen. So thanks to all of you for watching. I'm Carrie Pena alongside Michael Maduro. Take good care.
Thanks for joining us on Childhelp's Dare to Care podcast. If you found some inspiration from this conversation, please leave a written review on Apple or Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Keep the conversation going with us on our YouTube channel in the comments.